he has to understand and know that there are things that may happen to you because of the color of your skin, or there are ways that you may be perceived that are different from your friends. When you have to have those conversations of why you can't do this, it breaks your heart because you're taking a bit of their innocence away.
That's April Finkley. She's a Birmingham mother and educator, referring to some of those tough and necessary conversations that black parents have to have with their children, given the state of things. We've heard a lot today, and I want to go to Pastor Danita Ryan because Director Comey, when he was here at the 16th Street Baptist Church, he said it's hard to hate up close. So I want to ask you, these conversations that black parents need to have, I need to have with my 21-year-old son that I've tried to make a part of the dialogue of his life story. These conversations need to happen with black and white so that we know, coming together, that it's okay to love somebody who doesn't look like you.
Right. And one thing we have to also understand is that a lot of people have taken on the perception of things being wrong when it's only because of what they have heard. You know, even the Bible say that people perish for the lack of knowledge. Many times in the home, other than teaching them that everything you see, because it looks like, it's not always wrong. Sometimes taking time out and just really acknowledging what is happening, and that all police officers are not bad. Someone said something earlier about communication, and I think communication with the youth as well as others is one of the most important things to build relationships, and not to teach them that every officer is like the officer that messed up. We have nowadays where there's a generation gap that has come so close together that instead of empowering our younger people with knowledge, empowering them through education and teaching them that, hey, you can go to an officer and he can help you. He's not always there to hurt you. And so many times after what has happened, now we want to paint the whole picture black, but that is not so.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I feel is missing is the opportunity that these situations present us. They have been horrific and tragic and unnecessary, but it does present an opportunity for the nation and for respective communities to do what we're doing here. And when we have the conversations, they can't be finger pointing. We have to be driven towards solutions because fear and racism and prejudice and all manner of hate, it's learned behavior. And so the way that we move a generation beyond it is that we engage in the conversations, we break down those barriers, because prejudice literally means to prejudge. It means that I'm going to pass an assignment, or I'm going to pass judgment on you without having any kind of contact or knowledge of you. And often we are, in our own lives, just as guilty as those we're pointing the finger to, pointing our finger at, because we won't have real honest dialogue. And that's what many families, including my family, raising young kids, that's what we're doing. We're really raising up another generation to understand that this notion of racism and hate, that it's not right. And that regardless of color, regardless of socioeconomic background, we're all human. And so we've got to connect with people in that regard first before we start making assumptions that just because they are police officers or a black man or a black kid or a white kid, that they're different and that we can't connect. But not only do we have to teach our kids, but guess what? The parents have to model it as well. Because our kids are looking up to parents and adults to reinforce what they're learning in other avenues, which is why it's a community problem. It's not just a policing problem. It's not just a low-income problem. It's not just a white problem or a black problem. It's a societal problem. And so the way that we're going to deal with it is not going to be pointing the finger and saying it's everybody's problem. No, it's our problem. We've got to embrace it, and we all have to play a role in bringing change.
Okay.
I just want to add that our communities are being decimated, and one of the ways to solve a problem is to get to the root of the problem, and that's not what I'm hearing here. And again, I want us to have an honest conversation with each other. The root of the problem is not opportunities in the community, lack of jobs, lack of entrepreneurial endeavors in the community, poverty. So the root is poverty, and we keep attaching this crime conversation, and I'm excited that we're conversating about crime and waging a war on crime, but in all reality, we need to wage a war on poverty.
And so it is systemic, and I think when people look at this dialogue of what's going on, they say, and I just want to get to the criminal justice system, because when you look at blacks in the criminal justice system, there is this what seems to be race in it. It plays a big role in what's happening, and certainly that is a perception, and it may be a reality for a lot of people. I want to get to you, D.A. Veach, because where you sit as a prosecutor, as a district attorney, when people say that there is something strange when blacks get these heavy sentences for things that whites don't, and I know some of it have been corrected in the White House with some of the drug sentencing, for instance, but can you speak to that issue of systemic racism in the courts? That's
I can
a big
give you
one.
my opinion.
Yes.
I don't see us being racist in the court system. We take it on a case-by-case basis. And when somebody says, oh, you prosecuted a young black man, well, why don't they think about the young black mother or son who's the victim of that crime? I sit with victims all day. So it's their perspectives that I tend to identify with. Yes, there's poverty. Sure there is. When I was growing up, we didn't have air conditioning. We had a TV with 2 channels. Now, looking back on that, DHR would probably take my kids if I raised them like that today, but I didn't know it was poverty. I just know that my solution to the whole thing is going to lie with the family. You can't throw a child out there and expect them to survive on their own, educate themselves, get a job on their own. No, sir. You've got to raise that child up. You can't be an absentee mother or father and expect something good to come out of it. Occasionally it does, but responsibility starts right there. And once you do that, you'll see change. Now, we can all address programs. We can address poverty. We can address racism. The Bible says, among other things, think on things that are true and good and build up and not tear down. Because if you're always looking for racism or you're always looking for evil, you'll find it.
I've got to go back to what you said, that there was no racism. You didn't see racism, and I saw Carlos's face. The moment you said that.
Carlos sees racism behind every tree.
Okay. Carlos, you got the mic.
So it's pretty simple. Racism in our communities exists. Racism in our criminal justice system exists. And then, to hear a prosecutor to say, oh, racism doesn't exist in the criminal justice system, that lets me know right there that there is a problem. For him to just simply not understand that racism in our criminal justice system exists. When Carr mentioned poverty, right now, almost 30% of Birmingham is impoverished, right? And when you look in those areas right now, the West End area, 35211, 35221, some of those zip codes, we see most of the violent crimes coming out of those areas. We want to create programs like violence reduction initiatives that target, mass incarceration, but without addressing the root problem, which is poverty. We can't, and like Carl said, when you lack resources, when you lack economic understanding, when you lack education, right now we in Birmingham, we have 43 schools. 36, we have 18 that are failing and another 18 that are on the cusp of failing, right? So that educational problem is right here in the city. And when we lack jobs. How many jobs do we see in 35211 area, right? We haven't heard of many jobs coming to that area, but yet we want to talk about that racism doesn't exist. The ghettos were created by the government to hold primarily African Americans back in our communities.
So, Carlos, it's a big problem, and I think having this conversation and starting the dialogue is very important, because you have to eat the elephant one bite at a time. And so when we get together and have these conversations, when all of those things come up, we're gonna continue this conversation in our Facebook Live online. So make sure you tune in so you can hear some of these other thoughts. After this short break, we'll take a look at what's happening in our communities, what the future holds for our citizens of Alabama, what's working to move us forward. We'll be right back.
I'd love to be able to get people to erase everything when they look at another person erase everything that they see on the outside and be open-minded and look at that person as a human being and get to know them before they made a judgment on them.
More people, and we just have to just share our love. You know, we need to get out and pray or get to know one another, and then maybe it'll be a better place for us to live in the state of Birmingham, Alabama.